Good afternoon, Suidlanders. How are you? We trust that you are well in these strange, troubling, and difficult times. And we encourage you to remember how much more strange, troubling, and difficult it must be for people who don't have the hope that we do in our Lord, in the prophecies in the Bible, in the prophecies of Oom van Rensburg, in Suidlanders' National Emergency Plan, and, dare I say it, in our own preparations for the time that lies ahead of us. The time now is 2:30 on Friday, the 28th of July 2023, and this is Suidlanders The Week in Review, brought to you from a chilly Northern Cape. From the past week, India has banned the export of rice with immediate effect. India is the world's biggest exporter of rice by very far. Therefore, the ban is likely to have a serious effect upon rice prices in many countries, especially in Africa. In some places, the price has already doubled. I got a telephone call from an American last night telling me that the prices in his area of rice to buy in the shops have almost doubled. That's in the USA. The reason for the move is to control food price inflation for India's population of 1.4 billion people. It has led to some severe concerns in Africa, especially coming as it does, and we will get onto that subject again just now, coming as it does, hot on the heels, as we reported to you last week, of Russia's cancellation of the grain corridor, the corridor through the Black Sea for ships carrying grain from Ukraine, one of the world's biggest producers, for export to the rest of the world.
Well, in the last few days, Italy was home to the opposite extremes of climate change. Now, in the north of the country, sudden and violent storms caused death and destruction. In the end, 4 people died, including a 16-year-old girl who was on a camping trip and died after a tree fell on her tent. At the same time, in the south of the country, wildfires raged out of control around the city of Palermo in Sicily, forcing the evacuation of hundreds of people, and 200 other people across the island had to seek medical attention because of smoke inhalation. In the end, on the island, at least 3 people died because of the wildfire, including an 88-year-old woman who died because the emergency services could not reach her in time due to the fires that delayed them. But of course, this sweltering heat wave is also causing wildfires elsewhere in Europe. On the Greek island of Rhodes, at least 20,000 people, including a lot of foreign tourists, were forced to evacuate from homes and resorts. The fires are also threatening the medieval town of Dubrovnik in Croatia, and wildfires are also raging elsewhere across Portugal and on the Spanish island of Gran Canaria.
The past week has witnessed a heat wave across Europe. A number of deaths have been reported and wildfires have broken out. A NASA climatologist has declared that July 2023 is anticipated to be the hottest month in hundreds, if not thousands of years. However, videos have done the rounds this week in which other accredited climatologists have demonstrated, using the official data, that many of the recordings have been based upon ground temperatures and have not been taken at the standard scientific level of 2 meters in the air above the ground. Over the past week, a diplomatic crisis between Denmark and Sweden on the one hand and various Muslim countries on the other has occurred after copies of the Quran were burned in the 2 Scandinavian countries.
Ukraine's counter-offensive has struggled to achieve its objectives.
Here from the New York Times. After suffering heavy losses, Ukrainians pause to rethink strategy. In the article, they say that Ukraine has lost as much as 20% of its weapons and armor meant for the offensive. And the rate dropped as the campaign slowed and commanders shifted tactics.
As many of you will be aware, in early June, Ukraine at long last launched a substantial counter-offensive against the Russian lines in the Donbass region of eastern Ukraine, using hundreds of thousands of tons of Western-donated materiel. In spite of some gains being reported daily in Western media, none of the leading independent commentators seems to believe that Ukraine has made any progress, and social media is completely dominated by hundreds of videos showing destroyed Western tanks, armored fighting vehicles, infantry fighting vehicles, and trucks. One of the leading commentators on YouTube has begun to refer to Bradley Alley and Bradley Square for the number of Bradley infantry fighting vehicles that have been destroyed. Staying in Ukraine, and with some reference to our earlier story on India's ban on rice exports, following last week's massive Russian missile attack upon the grain handling facilities in the port city of Odessa, on Wednesday, Russia attacked and destroyed the grain export facilities in the Ukrainian port of Reni on the Danube, or Donau in German, the Danube or the Donau River. For a week, conservative social media in South Africa has been abuzz with the news that the US Undersecretary of State for Political Affairs, Victoria Nuland, renowned as one of the USA's most notorious warmongers and architects of regime change, or coups d'etat, is to pay a visit to South Africa following the recent diplomatic ructions when South Africa was caught between its loyalty to BRICS and Russia versus its obligations to the International Criminal Court in Den Haag on the matter of arresting Vladimir Putin for human trafficking in Ukraine. Now, to many people's surprise, the portent of human misery that accompanies her is even being reported in South African mainstream media, something completely unheard of in South African liberal circles. See the link to a News 24 article in the description below.
One of the things I'm always asked is, why Americans have sort of lost faith for a while and being able to do big things. If you could do anything at all, Joe, what would you do? I said I'd cure cancer. They looked at me like, why cancer? Because no one thinks we can. That's why, and we can. We end cancer as we know it. Deliver on our sacred obligations to veterans was the second thing I think is critically important.
Joe Biden has revealed over the past few days that he ended cancer as we know it. Again, please see the link to the video. In a leaked US Secret Service email, it has been revealed that Joe Biden's dog has bitten no fewer than 7 Secret Service agents, prompting at least one Suidlander to ask the question, is craziness contagious? Last night, Thursday the 27th of July, the EFF held a 10th anniversary gala dinner. 10 years since the founding of the Economic Freedom Fighters, and I believe that tomorrow at FNB Stadium they will hold a public mass commemoration anniversary birthday party. During the gala dinner, Julius Malema gave a speech in which he alluded to possible conspiracies against him involving EFF Deputy President Floyd Shivambu, apparently heard in the corners, as Julius Malema put it. He went on to say that he would be ruthless against those who conspire against him, and he added, "And Floyd knows that." Lastly, over the past 3 days, news has emerged of a coup d'etat by mutinous soldiers in Niger, in West Africa, the Sahel region of West Africa. There is widespread violence in the capital Niamey. This follows the US government's condemnation of activities of the Russian mercenary company Wagner in Niger. Although there is not conclusive evidence that Wagner directed the coup, and even Western observers are acknowledging that there is some lack of clarity over who has supported whom. And those are the main headlines for the past week. Briefly, I'll take you through a few South African items on News 24 in South Africa. Stage 4 load shedding will be implemented overnight tonight, Friday the 28th of July, and we may expect a weekend of load shedding. Friday's weather: batten down the hatches, a storm is brewing. Heavy rain, snow and icy conditions predicted over the Cape provinces, that is obviously the Western Cape, Eastern Cape and Northern Cape, spreading to KwaZulu-Natal and the Free State. And I believe, ladies and gentlemen, that is a fair summary of the news worth knowing for the past week. We wish you a blessed weekend and everything of the best in the tumultuous times that lie ahead of us. Thank you. Bye-bye.